This is the most fascinating, most exciting time in recorded history. It is the first time that fundamental change can take place within our lifetime. So here we are, a tremendous historical opportunity. Let's talk about it, let's use it, let's spread it, let's create an epidemic of positive, constructive thinking.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever desperately wanted massive change in your life and the world to a better, more balanced way of being, then do we have the Global Shift Now show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Ervin Laszlo, founder of systems philosophy and general evolution theory, formulator of the Akasha Paradigm, two-time nominated Nobel Peace Prize Candidate, winner of the Goi Peace Prize, author of more than 70 books, and the author of perhaps the single most important and most needed book for today, Global Shift Now. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about the newfound power and hope we have as individuals and a collective, why we need to shift now, and how we can bring it about. That plus we'll talk about the Akashic Field, Gini coefficient, noetic sciences, self-exploration, gene expression, altered consciousness, 6 cardinal beliefs, a world song and dance, global coherence, and what in the world genomes and phenomes have to do with anything. So welcome back to the show, Ervin. Are you ready to shine?
Michael, together with you, always a pleasure to shine.
It so goes both ways in a mighty woohoo! And I can't think of a more important topic. So before we dive right into things, is it even remotely possible we're here only by chance in a mechanistic universe and it's an us against nature world?
That's not the case. I don't think that's possible. But let's explore that.
All right. Well, we will explore it. Are you hopeful for the future?
Yes, cautiously hopeful. As long as there are people like you and the people around you, and they're growing, who can look at the situation and with a positive eye, and what we can undertake, look at it as an opportunity to change and not a danger of collapse, then I'm hopeful.
Thank you. Since our last interview, I keep going around saying, bifurcation of humanity, bifurcation of humanity. What is this critical crossroads going on, and what does that mean?
Well, a bifurcation is a technical term coming from the system sciences, from thermodynamics and other physical sciences. It really means that when you take the trajectory of evolution of a system, the way it evolves from time to time to time, for a long time it goes forward as a linear way. And then it can come a point where there is a fundamental change occurring. Something is kicking that system into a new way of evolving. Mm-hmm. It bifurcations. So bifurcation is really meaning a sudden shift in the way the system moves forward. Okay, we are systems that are moving because nothing is passive, only death and death. There's nothing dead in nature altogether. Certainly not in humanity. So we are moving forward. The question is, can we move forward the same way as we have in the past? Can we just continue on the same road? Or do we need to bifurcate? Sorry for this funny term, but it means fundamental change. I think we need that. I think it's coming to us. I think we are in it. The big question that we have to discuss is how do we go about realizing the better part, the chance that we have.
And you talk about things conspiring. I'm an optimist here, so I'm going to say conspiring in our favor. You say the virus pandemic loosened the hold of the reigning hierarchies, and we should be grateful for that. Now we can move forward. What's that mean?
I think I'm very controversial when I say that, but I think this pandemic is a blessing in disguise. In very deep disguise, to be sure. Mm-hmm. And we hope that it doesn't claim too many lives or any lives anymore. But we have to use its power to change. There are 2 principles to keep in mind. The change that we need is not piecemeal change, not picking it up and a little bit correcting it here and there, patching it up. I think ultimately we'll postpone then the real change that's coming. and will make the correcting measures more difficult because the old system will have dominated longer. So it's controversial, but to say that just to keep going the way we have been going is not a good way forward. I think we have to find a new way. Now, this new way is coming on the horizon. We knew that sooner or later it's going to come, and now it has come in the form of a very curious blessing, the blessing of a pandemic. I'm not telling that to people who have contacted it and whose families are around them and so on. It's difficult to believe. But when you get to humanity and the future of humanity, then we have to look at the big picture. And the big picture is fundamental change is needed. Fundamental change is now possible. Because as long as the old is so dominant, that is firmly seated, nothing will, or very little can actually shift it. It'll always get back to protecting its own interests, its own position. And that as long as that is the case, we will have a great difficulty in changing. I don't know what it will take. Now, Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, said already 15, 20, 35 years ago, they never thought the power of a small group of people to change the world. And she said nothing else ever has. But of course, the power of the small group of people is greater when it has a massive critical majority, a critical mass behind it. And how much is that critical mass have to be? Well, it depends how much you have to overcome. When you're overcoming a firm system, an established system, a thoroughly working system, seemingly working system, it has defenses. And you need a very large critical mass. But when that system is unstable, destabilizes, as it has been now by this pandemic, whether it gets restabilized the old way or goes to a new way, that is now the big question. That is the question that we have to face. So, but I think anyway, the necessity for change we have known, it's clear, it's true. And now that change is possible. So the question we have to discuss, Michael, is how do we change?
Thank you so much. And a few key points on this. First off, I'm with you. And I only see it as controversial on an individual level. I've had an uncle with COVID. I've had clients with COVID. I've known people who've passed away. So it is a really big deal. With that said, the only controversy is the controversy of the universe going, humanity, you're out of coherence. You're out of sustainability. Your system is broken. And so this lightening, if we look at this virus as a gift to destabilize us, makes it so much easier to change. Now, I sit each morning, I meditate, and I'm very lucky. And I get to meditate with squirrels and chipmunks in my lap. And one thing that's really cool about it is if one squirrel or chipmunk makes a sudden move, all of a sudden they all do, like a flock of birds. And that's what I'm seeing happening with humanity now. So if we look at, first, there was straight chaos and fear here in the US. I'll take the US as an example. Then, because of that, when an event that should have ignited people did with George Floyd's murder, all of a sudden we have the BLM movement. But now I'm watching it like a flock of birds moving and changing and taking on a life of its own because we are lighter. And I believe because there is this energy of change now about us.
Question is, change energy is here. The motivation is here. And you have what you're describing is what's also known as a butterfly effect. And a little butterfly flaps its wings, then it can create a storm because it amplifies, and it catalyzes most things. And the famous ecologist Garrett Harding said, you can't do one thing. You can't do one thing because you do any one thing, it has a myriad consequences. And it goes on, and ultimately it feeds back to oneself. We are part of the world on which we act. So here we are in the midst of a crisis. Crisis is danger, we know that. But crisis is also opportunity. It's only a very slight exaggeration, you can say, that there is really no fundamental progress, no what I call evolution in the world, in the absence of crisis. Crisis is a catalyst. Crisis is what makes things able to move forward. So we have that crisis now with us. Let's hope that it doesn't require further human sacrifice. It's not the individual that has to feel the blessing. All individuals together have to feel that blessing, because all individuals together, and our children and grandchildren, I even have great grandchildren, 2 great grandchildren. So this is, the point for them. We can now change, and we can, the first time in recorded history, and probably in any history of our species, we are able to govern that change, because we can be conscious of it. If we know how we should change, we have now a possibility to move forward. How? Very simple. By Gandhi said, then we can talk at it in more detail. But what Gandhi said is a very good principle. How? Become the change. You and I, individuals, we become that change. It spreads around it. We become the critical mass. We become the butterfly that creates the storm. So here we are, a tremendous epochal, historical opportunity in which we are sitting in the midst of right now. Let's talk about it. Let's use it. Let's spread it. Let's create an epidemic of positive, constructive thinking.
Woohoo! There was a few weeks ago, after the protesters were broken up at the White House. A few days later, there were protests gathering in the evening, and somebody started to throw something at the police, and another person yelled, "Stop it, don't do that. That's not what we're about." And that to me was a coming together, a coherent movement of a choice of humanity that the group made. You say that this change cannot come from a hierarchical world. It cannot be governed from the top, but it must be shaped from the bottom. What do you mean by that?
It must be, and it can be, fortunately, because the bottom is what the Oracle at Delphi already asked for. Who are we? Know thyself, the Oracle said. We ourselves are the change makers, the music makers, as Wholeness said in his famous poem, the one who make and shake the world. And it's in us. Now, this notion that humanity is somehow, a human being is disconnected from nature, from the world. Humanity is just subject to its own elemental drives for sex and survival and self-interest. All that is being shaken up by this movement. By this movement, which always a crisis catalyzes that. I was a child at the end of Second World War in Hungary. And I have seen incredible sense of liberation when finally on our side, the Russian army, then the American army came in, and the Nazi army had to pull out, and we were somehow again could breathe, and we could all pull together. But even while we were under Nazi occupation, there were countless acts of heroism. I was too small, 10 or 11 years old. I couldn't actually participate in that, but I felt it, and I knew it. And afterwards, there was this sense of now here we are, we can build a new world. And we started building a new world. Unfortunately, there was a communist dictatorship coming soon afterwards, a Stalinist dictatorship, which clamped down on it. But humanity is indomitable. I think every time we have a crisis, we have this sense of loyalty, of solidarity, of coming together and trying to create something which is better. Because this direction toward coherence. You said that word yourself, Andy. It's one of my favorite terms. It's the most important. Coherence is this key, the secret of life, secret of mind and consciousness. This drive toward coherence with us, within us, and with the world around us. That's in us. And it can be expressed when we allow it to come to expression, when we don't dominate it. We don't sweep it under the rug and mask it by everyday petty concerns. So you're talking me into with this questioning, into talking me into optimism, because I feel that truly it's in us. Let it come from in us, not from the authority above, not from the world around us. There is nobody who can dictate what we should do. Don't throw that stone in the police. That's not what we are about. Yes. So then all this is in us. We know what we are about, and we accomplish it peacefully and with a good solidarity movement, joining together. The old idea of democracy, joining together to create a world for people, by the people. The possibility is there. That's all I can say now. I think I can't repeat it enough. We have a chance to do that.
Thank you, thank you. So I look at consciousness as expanding. I look at awareness as always expanding, and I look at us continuously going around the mountain, where we continuously come back and go, oh wait, I'm here again. Have things changed? Oh yes, I've changed. I'm not the same I was before. We come back and go, wow, I'm seeing the same things again, but I'm more awake and aware at this time. So if we go back to World War II, I'm wondering, how have things changed? Because right now there seems to be a return toward authoritarian rule, a return toward an attempted return toward racial inequality that's always been there. I'm seeing these things as being pulled out from under the carpet to be eradicated at this time. But how are you seeing things if you were to compare the then post-World War II to where we are today?
Well, the new technologies give incredible power in the hands of those who control those technologies. And there is always on top, not always, but very often on top, there's a group of people who want to control it for their own benefit, for their own power base. And now with information technologies, not only the news is traveling fast, but instructions and obligation, commitments, and rules can be propagated. So these possibilities are there to create a kind of a new dictatorship. And those dictatorship was about to be launched in many places in Eastern Europe and in the Balkans, unfortunately. That has been shaken up. I think that is increasing the population is knowing the question is not having people governed from above. The question is not even the classical political question. Are you right or are you left? Are you for individual initiative or are you to some kind of a collective rule? That's not the question. And it's not the question who owns things. The question is what we do. The ultimate question, do we fight each other? Do we compete for our own short-term immediate benefits? Or do we collaborate in view of a larger picture? Crisis usually calls for collaboration. The English had fantastic acts of heroism and solidarity happening after Dunkirk, when the German army got across the English, or tried to get across the English Channel. It calls for solidarity. It calls for heroism in the common people. Now, this is part of the challenge. This is part of the blessing that is in deep disguise, that there is now a call for solidarity, a call for joining together. This is part of our nature. If there is such a thing of human nature, I think that it is. It's not just the seeking for domination and sex and wealth and power. I think that human nature is the seeking for creating communities, for living together, for being one with each other, for love, actually, ultimately. In my book on the reconnecting to the source, I had all these well-known people recounting their experiences, and they all ended up by the sense that after these unique transformative experiences, but they have felt a higher level, a deeper level of love to each other, to the world around them, to everything around it. An unconditional love, not just because I get something out of it, but truly feeling belonging, feeling at home, and feeling a sorrow, appreciation, even a gratefulness for the world in which we live. That is a sense that can come out. I think it can come out in the protest movements today. It can come out in the alternative policy movements today. And I think it's a great chance. And we have this unsettling rupture in the system that has been caused by the virus to thank for.
How do we then? Is it a matter of we go inside first to get centered, and all external work we do is led from the inside, how do we step forward?
Well, as I said before, be the change. So that's inside. There's a transformation inside. But it's not disconnected from the outside. You have to learn from the quantum sciences, from quantum physics and quantum biology, that we are so intimately connected to each other that what happens in us happens in others too. That there is a real epidemic going on, epidemic of consciousness and of conscious seeking for more things, for better things. So it's not separating, not inside or outside, me or the others. It's together. We are part of a single macroscopic quantum system. Okay, so that's the scientific definition of it. But that means that system, which is the system of life on Earth, the web of life, is an unbroken, seamless whole. And we are essential parts of it. Anything that we do reacts on the system. It's resonate. The system is resonating with everything we do. And we resonate with the rest of the system. We are part of that. If you start feeling that, then we become more natural beings. Then we are more connected, as I've said before, with the source. Then we are more joining together in a common field that I call the Akashic Field, which is something that we can also talk about.
Let's go there. Let's go there with the Akashic Field, because I see us as swimming in an informed soup. Actually, we're inseparable from the soup. But everything that we do, like this butterfly effect, if I snap my fingers like that, that's affecting something in Tokyo right now.
It does. And we can't even know the feedbacks all the time in detail, but it is. So this field, I have tried to, in a new book that will be published later on to this in 2020, talking about the immutable laws of the Akashic Field. This field is actually the universe as it relates to human existence, and human consciousness. When we recognize the universe, then it's not an impersonal, separate, dead system of mechanical change. The universe is a dynamic whole of which we are a part, and this whole obeys certain very key definite laws. Just let me mention a couple of these. One is certainly that everything in this system, which is the universe from our point of view, which is our universe, so to speak, everything is connected with everything else. That's an old insight. But now the new quantum sciences are showing, quantum cosmology is showing us, as you say, whatever you do now has an effect in Tokyo. Whatever we do in this web of life, in the biosphere, affects the rest of the biosphere. So this connection, universal connection, it's like a network, like an information network. And it connects us with information, it connects us with energy. The second, I'm not numbering them in any just saying one at a time. Another important law is that everything that happens is in some ways saved in the modern computer, cybernetic, internet sense. It's preserved. Nothing disappears completely. The effect of everything that has ever taken place is still there. Whatever we do has an eternal, continuing effect. And that's why it can talk about the Akashic records. Because under suitably changed, altered states of consciousness, we can get deeper into this field. And we can actually recall things that we don't remember consciously. We perhaps never knew consciously. Because it's there. This quantum field is at the same time a connection field and a memory field. So everything that is ever happened is still happening. It's still there in effect that everything will happen afterwards. The third, and I'll stop this enumeration. The third is that everything evolves together. Nothing stops the way it is now. There is evolution, a system-wide evolution. Everything is working with everything together. A coherence is there in the system. And there is a dynamic evolution in that system. And we are part of that evolution. The big question, the big task is to recognize the essential nature of that evolution, which way that evolution is going, and to take a conscious part of it. We are all connected. Everything we do is remembered. In a sense, our mind, our consciousness is immortal. And we are all participating in an evolutionary project. That is the new concept coming from the system sciences. And that's why I can identify this concept with the ancient notion of the Akasha, which is a deep dimension of the universe in which everything that happened is there, is present. So the old wisdom is very often recovered now in the latest sciences. And it's a source of hope, a source of confidence that we can move past this crisis. We can superate it, we can overcome it, and we can create a world in which evolves in the direction in which all things in this universe evolve since the Big Bang. They all evolve toward coherence, toward oneness, toward cooperation, with the interludes of competition and conflict being present but not determinant. This evolution moves in a positive direction on the whole. And when we are being shaken up a bit from the wrong ways, then we are waking up and we become part of that evolution.
Beautiful. In fact, when I think of shaken up, I think of an electron vibrating right before it hits that next state change. And that's where I see humanity. Going back to the question at the beginning here and bringing this forward through the Akashic Field, I was talking about could we have possibly evolved just in this mechanistic universe out of nowhere? And we look at genes and genomes, and there's really statistically no odds that there is not an intelligence to the universe. And that intelligence dictates that as long as we get in coherence, we're going to head someplace special. If not, we're just going to disappear.
I think there is an intelligence in the universe, yes. If this wasn't, then it would be a universe made up of random interactions among its elements. And now we know very good statistical calculations show that random interactions, for example, among the genes of a fruit fly, even if you would take a very short time, let's say a second per change in this genome, in this mixture, even that would be the length of time would be so big that it would exceed the length of time since the Big Bang for the age of the universe. So this universe, in other words, in simpler terms, this universe is so complex, so finely tuned that random cooperation, random interactions would not have created, not in the level, in the available frame of time. If you have infinite time, in infinite time, as mathematics tells us, everything is possible, everything can come about. But we don't have infinite time. This is a finite universe evolving together. And it evolves more and more in closer and closer togetherness, we might say. And we are part of that process. Our mind, our consciousness expresses it. Our genes are there to realize it. But the latest discoveries, of the last several years now, it's not the genetic code that is decisive for who we are and what we do. It's what is known as the epigenetic code, which is a cultural construct. There is a higher coordination of the genes. That higher coordination turns the genes on, individual genes, turns them on and off. It plays as on an instrument. Think of the genes as the keys of a piano. The pianist doesn't just play individual keys and all the keys at all times, and not playing the keys randomly. It chooses the keys on which to hit. And the epigenetic system chooses the genes to activate. And this activation can even be inherited. Certainly it can be spread. It can be acquired. It can be resonated with. So the epigenetic system is the expression of the consciousness, of the intelligence of the universe. If the intelligence was purely a random, dead, inert kind of an ensemble of things, a heap of things, then the epigenetic system would not be directional, would not be directed, it would not organize, it would not create a harmony by activating and deactivating the genes. but it does create music, a higher music of coherence, of collaboration, and of love. And that comes now from the new biology. And it joins together the new physics, the new biology, new psychology, and the depths of our consciousness. We are coherent seeking individuals, programmed for seeking coherence. And we have gone off beyond this, we have forgotten this, we have disregarded it, and now we have a chance to get back to it, to finally find out a little bit more, a little deeper, who we really are. That is our chance.
Thank you. So I want to dive more into how we can change and how we can flip epigenetically. Before we do that, maybe we get to address, it's important to remember why we not are as we are, because that begets the, well, I am as I am, as if we're stuck in a paradigm. But there are some obsolete assumptions that are still running and that are trying to come back up. So the system is chaotic now, which is when we're lightest. It's the time where we can make greatest change. But also people are trying to band-aid the system back together, holding on to the obsolete assumptions. And we get to let go of these. So I wonder if we can go through a few of these. For instance, the environment is an inexhaustible reservoir of resources.
Well, it's a faulty belief. It's something that is at the root of a lot of our problems. We can just take out everything what we want from the environment, use it, and throw it back in. Because the environment is not only an inexhaustible source, it's also an inexhaustible sink. And that's the double wrong belief. Its environment is a finite and a highly delicate system that can be easily disrupted and mismanaged. So we have to better be careful about assumptions that we have created the unsustainable world that we had before the pandemic, and which we must be careful not to get back to.
And then another one, thank you so much. Life is a struggle where only the fittest survive. In other words, don't seek towards helping your neighbor. That's going to harm you.
Well, that's the short-sighted, egoistic view, which, just to use that for a moment, is kind of a nice systems principle. It's called sub-optimizing. That means optimizing a part against the whole. Then the whole system can only work when all the parts work together. But if you optimize only one part, you want to generate more power for one part, then, of course, then you destroy the coherence, the integrity of the whole system. And that is what is actually taking place more and more in politics. The Hitler says, Deutschland über alles, which meant Germany above everything. And I don't want to engage into politics, but that's not so far from also a political motto of recent time. It says America first. Of course, it doesn't mean America, only America. But you can't put always a part first. You have to put the whole system in which you work first. Health is a property of our entire body, not one part or another part. And the health in society is a property, is a condition of all societies together. Disease, it has been said in the new paradigm in medicine, disease is not even an individual phenomenon. It's not something that happens to one person. A disease is a pathology of information, the way the information is processed by the system. So there are many, many of these new paradigms, new ideas coming forth. The thing is, all together, we are the whole. We are the subject and the prototype and the object of evolution together. And the part is only important, it's very important, but insofar as it's put into the right context of being a part of the whole. So the real operative, correct principle is you try to optimize, you try to make the whole healthy, viable, flourishing, then all its parts will flourish. As long as you think only of the parts and never mind the rest, then you can create a serious imbalance in the system. There were a number of decades ago, Charlie Wilson, who was then president of General Motors, said in a congressional hearing, what is good for General Motors is good for the country. And it has been a lot quoted since then, and those years then, and it has all been discussed whether this is really true. And it turns out that this isn't true, because what could be good for General Motors in the short term, for example, cutting down on expensive pollution combating disease devices, that is not good for the world around that automobile system. So on the long term, the interests coincide, but in the short term, we have to put priority to the whole system in which we live. It's the same thing as putting Germany above all else, or our country, or whatever we do, or our ethnic group above the rest. We have to work it together. The real good of the system is what is good for all of us together. We live in a systemic universe. The quantum sciences tell us that we are a macroscopic, a higher level, high-dimensional, multidimensional quantum system where all things operate together. We are part of an Akashic Field, if you like. And that is something that we can feel, we can learn, we can experience, but we also have to know it intellectually. We have to know it rationally so that we don't work against it and don't make the mistake of getting back into the old way in which we prioritize the part against the interest of the others, separate the system, break it apart, and create conflict, which is what is happening today. And it is high time that there are signs and indications get reinforced for overcoming this development.
Thank you, thank you. I look at us as each individual expressions, roses on the bush of humanity, or as individual cells on the human beingness that is a one. And if we look at it that way, so if we go in the US where I'm still boggled that health concerns have become political or that a virus has become political, that's almost beyond my understanding. But with that said, there is an argument, mask, no mask in the US. And the best description that I have heard of what you're talking about here is, and when we're looking at this human beingness, is mine protects you and yours protects mine. When we get out of the individualistic place and into the wholeness, for instance, this virus, if you cured, and I'll put that in quotes, cured, vaccinated, whatever you want it, one particular people, but not all the peoples of the world, it's coming back because we are one.
That's another element of why this is a blessing in disguise. We are all one, yes. There is nobody is outside of this planet. You couldn't get off this planet and say, I want to get away from this to a hell's place. It's all. The smallest, most remote island in the Pacific is just as much in it as the center of Paris or New York. So a big lesson to learn. And also how, when I protect your interest, I protect my interest. If I protect my interest disregarding your interest, then I'm not doing myself any service either. We are together. We have our joint interests, and we are one people, one system, having a single health, even having a single mind. You know, there's a famous saying by the big physicist Erwin Schrödinger. He said, consciousness is one. There is no sense, no way in which we can talk about consciousness in the plural. And this comes from a physical scientist. What did he mean by that? He meant that really that mind that we have in our heads, that we live, that is us, is intrinsically and intimately connected with all other minds. So finally, we are part of this large mind, which is the mind or consciousness of humanity. And in that sense, we can talk about even the conscious and the intelligence of the universe itself.
Thank you. Would you mind sharing with us some of, as you see it, for instance, you have in this beautiful, beautiful book, The 10 Commandments of Living in a World of Diversity. Would you mind sharing some assumptions that we both get to challenge and new ways of looking at things? Number one, live in ways that enable other people to live as well, meeting your needs without detracting from the chances that other people meet their needs.
Absolutely. Well, this is a very big lesson because everything we do affects others. In a very concrete sense, the way we consume affects the very possibility of adequate consumption of others. If we consume unconsciously, irresponsibly, if we waste resources, then in this environment, a finite planetary environment, we reduce the chances of other people to have access to the resources they need. Whatever you do affects other people. So the first principle of ethics, I think, of the new planetary or global ethics is live in a way that others can also live. This was already pronounced by Gandhi. He said it in a typical way. In another way, he says, live more simply so that others could simply live.
Amen.
So I think I want to say it's not a question of the intrinsic simplicity of our lifestyle. It's the question of the effect of our lifestyle on others as we feed back onto us. Not pure altruism, because what we do to others, we also do to us. So, but be conscious of whatever you do, that you are part of a community. And what is first and foremost in your mind is to maintain that community in a living, flourishing, striving way.
Beautiful. And we'll go right along with that. Live in ways that respect the right to life and to economic and cultural development of all people, wherever they live and whatever their ethnic origin, sex, citizenship, or station in life.
Well, that's part of the idea of an interdependent, ultimately one human community on the planet. We need to have a chance to become truly what we are, to fulfill ourselves, to meet our needs, and to develop. The big problem in this inequitable world of the pre-pandemic world, which is on the horizon and threatens to come back, which we must avoid, is that we don't take care of the prospects, of the opportunities of others. We are all striving to be satisfied, fulfilled, real human beings, really part of a community of life on the planet. That's our basic striving. And we should not live in a way that frustrates this movement by other people. We all need to express our intrinsic tendency toward wholeness, toward coherence, toward oneness, which satisfies our innermost needs, our innermost sense of our mind, of our consciousness, and which is ultimately the precondition for a healthy life and even for a life for survival on this planet. We all survive together in peace, or probably none of us can survive.
So now, thank you. Let's go to a few really challenging ones. I'm going to put challenging in quotes because that's a limiting belief. It doesn't need to be challenging. And if we get in coherence, we have one mind, but if that mind is all vibrating in harmony together, I think this could switch in a heartbeat. Require of your political leaders that they relate to all other states and peoples peacefully in a spirit of cooperation, recognizing the legitimate aspirations for a better life and healthy environment of all the institutions created for the management of human life on the planet.
Well, I suggested this because this is not the case under the old dominant power politics, where every power center only is occupied primarily, with exceptions, of course, but on the whole, most power centers were occupied with their own interests, with maintaining and increasing their own power, their own dominance. As long as we do that, we destroy the integrity of the system. We are one family seeking together a higher form of life on Earth. And that is our chance, that is part of our nature, and that chance for seeking it must be given. We must allow to each other. We can commit crimes against humanity by forbidding, by limiting the access of other people to these resources that they need and to the development they ultimately internally seek. There are many cultures in the West, many cultures in Asia, in Africa, in various parts of the world, where this comes to expression very clearly. The intrinsic desire to do good, to be part of a thriving community. The the idea of ultimately happiness should be the key element, the gross human happiness as an index, more than the gross human product or industrial product. That should be the index, the criterion for this desire, for defining policy. In Bhutan, this tiny country near the Mount Everest in Asia, has trying to do that, put that into practice. It's worth looking at because it's a real attempt, and the rest of us can perhaps come closer to this idea. Let's put our gross happiness as the main criterion of progress instead of the gross product.
Thank you. And that brings us to when you talk about, without intending it, having crimes against humanity. I'm looking at what's going on here stateside with Facebook and with what's going on with people divesting themselves of advertising on Facebook. You say require of business leaders in your society that they accept responsibility not only for the owners and shareholders of their enterprise, and usually that's on the stock market, thinking a day-to-day basis or 3 months at most, but for all its stakeholders. And we are all the stakeholders of every single company.
Well, originally, business was the idea of a system that operates for human benefit, for public benefit. If you look at the writings of Carnegie, so many of the captains of industry of earlier times, then you will find that they were looking at their business, at their enterprise, as a means, as a vehicle for delivering the good for people around them. And their business became that sort of self-oriented, self-servant, becoming interested only in its own growth, in its own interests. Some time ago, the retiring chairman of General Electric asked what was his main motivation, main desire in life. And he said what really motivated him is competition, competing. What he wanted to do was to win. And this kind of motivation makes for a highly polarized world where a few become richer and more powerful, and the rest become less powerful and disempowered and poorer. So holding together, because our interests lie together, that is one of the big lessons to learn. And business has to become part of this. It's not an enterprise which is responsible only to its own shareholders, to its owners. It's an enterprise in the world which operates by affecting people and affecting their resources and even the very chance of development. So what business does has a very great impact on the world, and therefore it has a very great responsibility for acting together in this world so that it becomes a whole world in which the whole has precedence over its part. It's something new for business, or rather old also for business, but new for the last few decades of business, where it only was concerned with its own. But there are exceptions. Of course, there are business leaders who are beginning to realize this. There are movements for sustainable management, for a new kind of enterprise that serves the common good. And these have to be reinforced. And these have to be the prototype, not the exception, but the rule in the post-pandemic world in which we can recreate a better world rather than fall back into the old.
When we're talking about creating a better world, right now there is a squeeze, particularly in the U.S., but also, man, there's a health squeeze and a food squeeze in many, many countries and less fortunate people around the world. In the U.S., a very few number of families hold more than 50%, maybe it's more than 90% of the wealth of the entire nation. How do we, I know it's important that we help the less privileged. How do we break this system and this cycle where the money, I feel like it's mining humanity. Those who have, and I'm not picking on anybody, there's a system that gets to be, come into a higher level of coherence. But how do we stop this system where the mining from the few is taking the wealth, what's left from the many, and distributing it to the few?
Well, that's the big challenge. That's the big question before us. What has happened was that the function of money has changed. The function of money was to be a medium of exchange to get people what they need so they can earn it, they can work, they can create, they get money, and they can take care of their needs. The function of money has become, in the last several decades, a single purpose is to make more money. It's just to generate itself, independently of what it does, but in the real world, how it affects the real world. So this is part of the need for a new system. It's a part of a disruption in the old system. The whole idea of profit. Okay, so fine, we had this triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit. So now it has to be actually double bottom line, and the people and planet, and profit has to be a means, not an end. That's not a bottom line. That's how you can achieve a betterment for people and for planet. That's what we need to do. At least we need business for, not just to feed on itself. It's, when a set of cells in an organism starts only feeding itself and reproducing itself with regard to the organism, sooner or later it destroys the organism. We call it cancer. Mm-hmm. When there is a group of, or a sector in the human family that is only feeds itself without regard to the rest, then it becomes a kind of a cancer. So this has to change. Business is not noble as long as it only serves its shareholders. It's noble when it serves humanity, when it serves the entire system of humanity in the planet's ecosphere. And this can change if we really rethink who we are. We don't patronize, we don't invest in businesses that only serve themselves, but look for those that have a higher consciousness, a higher purpose. Those are beginning to come about. There are businesses like this moving. There's a whole big movement in enterprise leadership in this direction. But it has to be strong enough to take over the governance of the system and not just become a side effect that we're discussing on holidays and on weekends. It has to become the main element of the purpose, of the very, very life purpose of business, the purpose of keeping the human system in tune with each other and with the rest of life on this planet.
Thank you. Just a few more questions, then we'll wind things down, let you get to dinner. Thank you so much for taking the time with me. Does our monetary system worldwide, and I see it on shaky legs to say the least right now, does that get to change?
Well, if money expresses value, then the question is, what value does it express? If it's just simply to make more money and serve the people who own that original input of the money so that they own more and more money, then it's a disease in the system. So the whole idea of money, of what money is, has to change. It's a convenient medium of exchange. Mm-hmm. I live here in Tuscany, in Italy, close to Siena. I mean, it's also part of Tuscany, where one of the first banks in 1594, Monte Paschi di Siena, which is still a major bank in Italy, it was established in 1594 as among shepherds, or it served shepherds. Shepherds came and deposited the cheese that they made, and in exchange they could get some resources that they needed to work on their farm and on their livelihood. So it was a medium of exchange instead of bartering. It's a more convenient to use a medium of exchange instead of bartering directly. But that was a meaningful use for business. It isn't that anymore, or for banking. It isn't that anymore. Banks don't operate primarily, except for some ethical banks and exceptional banks. But for the most part, banking system operates to help the people, their clients, to make more money and themselves to become richer. So as you ask, I mean, it's quite clear the monetary system itself has to be changed. Fundamental change has to come. Not enough to patch it up, to change the leadership structure of an enterprise without changing the very nature of money and of power and of wealth.
Thank you. You are using your voice, you are using your books, and I am amazed at the turnaround on your books, beyond amazed at it. When you say be the change we want to see in the world, what is one thing we can each do individually to start to shift? I want to say shift consciousness. Consciousness is always shifting. Consciousness is always expanding and growing. But to shift the course of humanity at this time.
I come back to Gandhi's saying, be the change. You know, there's a big difference between classical medicine, for example, and the latest tendencies of medicine in healing arts. In classical medicine, a doctor prescribed a cure to the patient. He or she didn't take it himself, just prescribed it and had the other ones do it. In the new medicine, it's like the new artist also, or the new healer altogether, is becoming himself and herself something which is an example, an illustration, exemplification of the change that he or she believes we need. Experience it and communicate the experience instead of prescribing it. So become the change, I would say, yes. Experience it, not just learn about it and teach it, but undergo that shift. It's there, it's possible. So have the courage to undergo it.
We had on Dean Radin for my last interview, the Center for Noetic Sciences. And it's a small world, isn't it? I love this.
He was a contributor to one of my newest books. Yes, he's a remarkable person.
He is absolutely remarkable. And he talked about the number one thing for change. And we were talking more of the science of magic and being able to attract. And I wanted to talk about attracting a new future. And he was saying that you have to be, his word wasn't coherence. It may have been frequency. It's escaping me. It might have been resonance. It's all the same concept of when you are vibrating in the frequency with the oneness of what you desire, then that desire will already exist.
Well, if that new paradigm is, which I believe it is, that we are not bits of matter joining together by mechanistic laws, but we are systems of vibration, vibrating of a ground state, a basic physical field in the universe, the Akashic Field or the Grand Unified Field, then our purpose is to vibrate together. Because together, to vibrate in phase, you would say. Mm-hmm. Because then together we can create a higher harmony. We can create a coherent whole. And that whole, in turn, can vibrate with other wholes and create the larger and larger wholes until we get a vibrating system, which is the system of life on this planet, which perhaps we recognize one day, not so long from now, that is also a part of a system of life in other parts of this universe. But we need to become together by vibrating, resonating together. That's a very good metaphor. And in sense of the quantum sciences, it's more than a metaphor. It's the ontological, the realistic basis of physical existence, vibrating in a way that we can join with the vibrations of others and create a super vibration, a coherent vibration in the world of which we are a part.
Woohoo! On that note, where can people go to find your work, Ervin, and to find out more?
Well, you can tell people. My latest published book was published on March 24th, Reconnecting to the Source, which has many of these ideas, also examples of a deep spiritual recognition of who we really are by people recounting their own experiences. My current book, which is being published now on the internet, on Amazon and in other sources, as we speak, is already the one whose title you mentioned. It's called Global Shift Now. It's the subtitle, A Call to Evolution. I mean very seriously, a call to evolution. I also have a book coming out in the fall, still more, which is dealing with the Akashic Field, the immutable laws of the Akashic Field, a little bit in the sense in which we already discussed it in this program. So I'm trying to produce the ideas that people can comprehend, that we can join together, and that we can experience the world finally, and not only intellectually sort of digest it as an abstract concept, but come close to us and experience it. So look at my website, myname.com, or the LaszloInstitute.com. Any of these books, you will find it, and hopefully you'll find that they give you food for thought.
Excellent, excellent. Any last words of wisdom? And I like that we've been winding things up in this so super coherent direction, because I'm seeing us as this flock of birds coming together and starting to do a special dance.
Well, just to put it in subjective terms, this is the most fascinating, most exciting time in recorded history, perhaps in the very history of humanity on this earth. Because it's the first time that change, fundamental change, can take place within our lifetime, not take hundreds of years and many generations. Within a single lifetime, major change can occur and is occurring. And for the first time, this major change can be consciously guided, consciously knowing who we are and where we want to go. This is our big chance. Everything that helps us to recognize, to realize this chance is a good thing, even including the virus. But let's look at positive things that help us recognize it, that doesn't call for sacrifice. But we live on the most exciting time in history. Enjoy it, but take part of it, be a positive part of it.
Woohoo! I cannot thank you enough, Ervin. You've outdone yourself. This is beautiful. Your book, to me, right now, here today, is the most important book out there as far as I'm concerned. It's a blueprint. It's not necessarily easy. Being the change you want to see in the world takes making some very conscious decisions, but your book is so important for people today, so I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you, Michael. It's wonderful to be able to talk with you and to reach the people that you reach. You can create that critical mass that we need to realize the potentials that we have in front of us.
Thank you so much. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get global shift now, and begin to make massive shifts on the inside and for humanity today, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Ervin.
It's wonderful. My goodness, how you can carry to do this. I normally don't do more than 20, 25 minutes, but with you it can do it, and it doesn't notice it.
If you're watching this, then you are a light worker. You're a light warrior, and I want to help. We offer everything from boot camps, mini masterclasses, full-on masterminds, and private one-on-one coaching with me. To find out more about our upcoming courses, simply visit InspireNationUniversity.com or click on the links below. And to find out more about coaching, simply visit InspireNationShow.com/coaching. We also have weekly YouTube live events with me where you can ask me your questions live, and YouTube premieres featuring me and our guests. Simply subscribe below and click on the bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows. Wow, wow, wow. Did I just have the most special, life-changing, world-changing, be the change you want to see in the world interviews with Dr. Ervin Laszlo. To check out more incredible interviews to change your life and change the world, click here. Be sure to subscribe below and click on that bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows, YouTube premieres, and live events every Sunday night with me. You can find out about all of our boot camps and mini master classes and coaching with me by clicking on the links below. Be sure, big thumbs up if you like this, leave your comments, and above and beyond all else, shine bright. Woohoo! Love you guys.